Welcome back to yet another recording of the Gaming Grounds channel. I am your host, Action Jack. I once again want to give thanks to everybody that stays subscribed and to those that view my channel and share my channel as well. I want to start off with, before I get into this conversation, I understand this is going to be a long video. I don't plan to edit it down because everything I feel like I'm going to say is going to be necessary. Outside of that, understand that this is a hobby. This is about gaming. This is just my viewpoint, my opinion on where I feel like the gaming industry is standing, the status of gaming, as the video was titled. By no means am I an expert, or if I've done research on here and there. This is solely based off of being a gamer for 30 plus years and just kind of the direction that I kind of see the gaming industry going and kind of where it stands. So now that all of those disclaimers are out of the way, let's get started. So first and foremost, when we talk about the status of gaming, whether you see it as a good thing or a bad thing at this point, understand that there is a multitude of parties that play a role within the status of gaming. And so the parties that we have right now are investors, developers, media, and also the consumer, which, as you know, we probably know most of you watching right now are the consumer. So if you ever look at gaming and whether you deem it as in a bad place or in a good place, understand all four, if not possibly more, parties are involved. But those are kind of the key parties, if you will, that determine what we get, what we see, what's well received and what's not well received, and just kind of the direction that we're moving as a whole, if you will. So when we lay the foundation for that, I want to talk about the evolution of gaming based off of those four parties that we're talking about at this point in time. So we always look at the graphic aspect of it. You know, graphics are always something that is very upfront. You know, you don't have to dig too deep into graphics. You don't have to really get into the 1080 this, 4K that, unless you want to. I mean, you don't have to, but you can look for yourself to see, okay, does this game look good to me? Does this game look interesting? Does it look appealing? In the nature of how the artistry is set, not necessarily the gameplay, but just the artistry of the direction that the developer themselves want to go in. This right now, while it was always a very interesting thing coming up when we talk about moving from the, Nintendo, Super Nintendo, from, going into PlayStation and the 360s and things like that. And then you saw these graphical leaps and seeing what these developers were able to do with, different physics, whether it was like the exploding physics of like Red Faction, or if we were talking about how lifelike something could look when you look at a LA Noire, or even when you look at some of the movies, cinema type things like a Death Stranding. You know what I mean? So that's always something that was supposed to be exciting. But unfortunately, with everything that has a positive, there is a negative. And there has been negative connotations centered around graphics. And that's solely because it tends to be put as the forefront and almost the only thing that's important. I understand within X, or whether you're on Facebook or whatever social media platform you subscribe to, whenever personnel get on there and they get to talking about a game, graphics is the first thing that come up. And we all understand that that's not the one and only thing that someone looks forward to within gaming. It's just the only thing that gets talked about, to be honest with you. So if we're talking about graphics, if it's not the top tier, quote unquote, AAA $1 million spender, then most people don't deem it as a good game. And it's a sad thing to see, but that's kind of where we've gotten, even to the point of just kind of getting it down to 4K this and 4K that, to where there are art styles. Like anything can be in 4K, is just a resolution. It doesn't determine how, the cell shade, or if you decide to go in a more hand-drawn fashion, much in the nature of Cuphead and Mouse PI. There are different directions you can go into. But graphics have become a thing that I think has capped. I don't think we need to go further, and I don't think we should go further. The more that developers spend time on doing that, I feel like the less time they spend on the areas that really need attention, the areas that really have been left behind, or I can even say are a couple of generations behind, to be honest with you. And I kind of put AI in that category, not the AI that we're looking at now, which your Chat GPT or things like that, or the AI that a lot of developers are talking about utilizing for dialogue in their games, or to help them, create certain assets within a game to help these development cycles like go down a little bit. I'm talking about like the AI in the CPU, just kind of how intelligent they are. Most of us play games that have like an easy, normal, hard difficulty, and sometimes those difficulties are very skewed. I'm all for a game being difficult, but when the AI in itself doesn't necessarily have a personality of its own, it's more of you trying to, I guess, figure out patterns, or trying to get lucky, if you will, sometimes, or get your skill level to that point to where you can outdo that AI or outdo the CPU. I think at some point we should have already been to the point to where these CPUs are just as intelligent, if not can adapt to the player, if you will. That's kind of why I like the spin that the Forza team, or Turn 10, took with the Forza series, to where they kind of had a ghost based off of how you play and based off of your statistics and how you function. Your AI or your ghost would actually act just like you when you were not present to play the game. But that's something that really, really, really needs to evolve. But graphics in itself has always been the forefront, and is starting to become a very ugly thing. And it's also starting to be that catalyst of if we're in that next generation or not. There's more to the generation than graphics. It's very simplistic, and I'm just releasing my next product, so that's my next generation product. But people have tied that to graphics. Going into the next thing that shows evolution, or that's going to be a evolving point for a company, is gimmicks. That's another thing that has been turned into something negative. The word gimmicks does not mean that it's just something that's skewed to get your dollar, and it doesn't really provide a purpose. Gimmicks can be anything from motion controls to Rumble, to you doing something like Kinect, or whatever case may be. It's that enticing thing that the developer or the company throws at you to get you to buy the product. If you look at the new iPhones, or even just new phones in general, their new gimmick is to say, hey, we have AI on your phone. You don't have to go to these other companies that may charge you a subscription fee. This is something that's built on your phone. For example, with my Pixel 9, they have the Add Me feature on the camera. If I take a picture with somebody and we couldn't get the third person in the picture, all I got to do is take the picture of two. We swap out. That third person stands in the right spot, take the picture, and it looks like all three of us were in there. That there is a gimmick. It's nothing negative about it. It's just what the term is. Should the term in itself change? Possibly. I mean, we do have other terms for it, and the words are features. So whether you want to say, okay, let's say with the PS5, it has the feature of the haptic feedback, that's a feature. But for whatever reason, gaming, content creators, consumers have tied down on the word gimmick, preferably around Nintendo. But nonetheless, the word gimmicks tends to just stay in that negative space and just kind of get tied into gaming. And a part of me feels like that has everything to do with the fact that when a developer such as Sony or Microsoft or Nintendo comes up with a feature for their console or gimmick for their console, the developer doesn't really buy into it, or not enough developers buy into it. So therefore it gets deemed as a gimmick, which then the word turns into this negative connotation or negative piece, if you will, that really shouldn't be within the gaming space. It's just a feature that the company gave you that the developers themselves did not utilize, and therefore the word gimmick comes up, and then it kind of looks at like it's a cash grab and not something that's truly utilized, all because the developers just never used it. And I'm not going to put that 100% on the third-party developers, because let's be honest, some first-party developers don't use them either. So that's another thing that I feel like needs to evolve. Pricing in itself has changed to the $70 marker. With the way games look and the time that it takes to make, I can see it. $70 for some games. Not all games need to be $70 just because that price point is there. I think that's something that should go from a game-to-game basis. By no means do I want to get back into, what was it, the 5th generation, to where if you had a 64, those cartridges were in different pricing. And yes, I know there was a reason why they had different pricing. Same thing with the SNES. I know why there were different prices. But when it comes down to today's platform, like, you can price your game at a good price point to entice people to come in. if you just throw it at 70 and people just kind of eyeball your game and feel like it's not 70, you kind of buried yourself. That doesn't say that, let's say, for example, your game is 50 and another game is 70. That doesn't diminish your game. Unfortunately, there are some consumers that look at it that way of, oh, well, your game is $40 and it might not be worth it. Or, if your game is 70, they'll even turn and say, well, I don't think it's worth it. So at this point, sometimes you shouldn't just listen to the consumer. You should just think for yourself, like, if this is my first game out the rip, it's not a lot going on. We didn't really invest too much into it. Then price it at that point. But, we look at Expedition 33. I think this game is setting itself up for success when we talk about not only the time frame of how long it takes for you to beat the game, because we don't need 100 hours within the game, and that doesn't determine that your game is good either. It just seems like it's fluff. But they went with a price point of $50, which that's going to entice a lot of people to come in, even though 50 used to be a regular price point for gaming. Is now seen as a discount or seen as a viable value, if you will, for a game. So I want to see what that does sales wise. Of course, the game in itself still needs to be good, but I still like the idea of them coming in at 50, especially with this being their very first game, kind of getting their feet wet. And then who knows, if they have success with this game and they make a sequel to it. I don't know what you would call it, but you make a sequel to it, or you just make another IP and you just have the assets for this one already. Then what you can do is then get to that $60 or $70 point, because you say, okay, look, I have a rapport. Like, you see the work that we do, and we plan to make this one bigger and better, and this is why we increase the budget, So I think that's just kind of how it all works out. But we get to the last two, and I feel like these two go into to each other, one and the same. And I'm talking creativity and advertisement. So creativity, we've seen that kind of floating around these past couple of days on social media, to where some, feel like Nintendo's not creative. I think even Sean Layton was saying that PlayStation's kind of taken a brief hiatus on creativity. We've never really known Microsoft game-wise for creativity, but I will say there are creative games there. I mean, you have to be pretty creative to come up with a Sunset Overdrive. You have to be creative to come up with a Gears. You have to be creative to come up with a Cameo. There are games that you have to be creative to make. Let's not just put this out there as if, any Joe Schmo can just come off the street and make those games, because really they couldn't. And I'm not talking about from a talent aspect. I'm talking about from a idea aspect of even making that a thing. So when you talk about creativity, it also ties into how you push it to the masses, how you push it to the market. And when you're pushing something to the market, you could either go the route of old and say, all right, cool. It has a bunch of explosions. It has nice graphics. You can steal cars. You can do whatever, or you can go the multiplayer route, to where if it's a party game, or you can go the family route. If you feel like you want to get everyone involved. But there's a multitude of ways to be creative in your advertisement, opposed to just kind of throwing up a trailer to show a couple things here and there. And I think that in itself is lost, along with some of the different, genres or different styles of game is being lost within gaming too. That really needs to get back to not only its normancy, but then get to the point of propelling past that, or evolving past that, to something that we really couldn't even imagine. We joke about all the time on the Winging It podcast, and even Sandstorm's podcast, that Nintendo has to have somebody in a room somewhere on shrooms, smoking whatever, to even come up with half of the stuff that they come up with, because you can't imagine. Like, anybody will tell you can't call Nintendo. Nintendo is just a beast of their own. You can't imagine what they're going to come up with. So when you see it, it's something that you never would have imagined. I mean, to even add more credence into that, whenever people ask, like, oh, what do you think the next Mario is going to be, they always reference the previous Mario. They never give you an idea of their own, because they can't come up with something like that. For the longest, whenever we were talking about the successor for 64, a lot of people were, oh, it's Mario 128. Same thing with Galaxy. Oh, Galaxy 3, or, Odyssey 2. You know what I'm saying? Like, they always think about the previous game, because they don't have an idea of their own, because most people are not on that creativity aspect or that creativity curve like Nintendo. So I think that's where we need to get back to, and it shouldn't really just be Nintendo doing it. And these indies, I don't want to ever forget these indies, on both the VR space as well as the console space. I think all of this in itself needs to evolve in its own way, and I'll do a separate video to kind of give my input as into what I think would be good ways to evolve that. But as of right now, I just kind of want to lay the foundation of what this video is as far as where I feel like the status is as far as gaming. So with graphics, gimmicks, pricing, creativity, and advertisement, I all feel like they're at their lowest point right now. And they all stem from each other. They all need each other to succeed. You can't charge me 70 if the creativity and the gimmicks and the graphics are not there. You know what I mean? Like, if you didn't do anything different from Call of Duty, don't try to sell me a first-person shooter. If you didn't do anything different from Madden, don't try to sell me a football game. You know what I'm saying? Like, you got to switch it up. You got to flip it up. So now I want to go into the main focus. I feel like gaming is at right now, and kind of where it needs to go. But as of right now, we only have like a few focus points right now. We have VR, which is kind of on the lower tier of focus. As I mentioned before, graphics. Graphics is just all the rage right now. Whether you're talking about this new PSSR that the PS5 Pro is supposed to do, if we're talking about, trying to see what the Switch 2 or Switch successor is going to be, and getting into DLSS and, software enhancements opposed to, going brute force with the hardware enhancements. So graphics is the main focus. Cloud gaming has been a focus for quite some time. It's just, I don't think America in its entirety has the infrastructure to do it, but at the same time, there are some companies that just haven't really figured it out to where it's something that's viable. I know Xbox is trying. You still have GeForce Now that's doing it. I know there are a couple other companies that do this as well, along with Luna still existing. So cloud gaming is another one, and then also hardware. Hardware is always going to be a focus. Even going forward, whether we talk about, hardware that accepts physical media or we're talking about just digital only hardware. These are kind of like those key focus points for all developers or all manufacturers at this point in time. For me personally, to kind of, give my small input on each one, I feel like VR needs a stronger focus. And how can I put this without getting too deep into VR? Because I have a passionate, love for VR right now. But without going too deep into it, when I say I feel like VR needs a true focus, I feel like it needs more content creators that are genuine. There are tons of content creators right now, but there's only a few that I truly trust that you can go to. When we talk about a media push that it truly needs, there's no reason why there are, the IGNs, whether you love them or hate them, they still are deemed as something viable to go to for a lot of people, and they're a respected company. So when we look at the Game Informers, the IGNs, who am I missing? GameSpots, your PlayStation areas, your Xbox, whatever. Like, you have those real media sources that consider themselves journalists and not just content creators, and then run away from the word journalist or the title journalist. But you have true blue journalists that don't do VR reviews. The only website I know right now that's doing like legitimate VR reviews is VR Grid. And I mean, like, gets the game, plays the game, shows it, reviews it, gives it a score. I don't even know if we have Metacritic scores for VR games, and I wouldn't imagine so, because there are probably not enough personnel that actually review these games. And we're talking about headsets that are accessible. Like, there isn't a situation of like, oh, all headsets are 1,000 plus. Like, the lowest headset right now is the 3S, a Quest 3S, and that's $300. So it's accessible. The games are there. It's enough games for you to review, and especially with how, the market can be oversaturated in so many areas, especially on the mobile front and the VR front. It would help to have some of these media platforms really kind of point out these key games. Especially when you look at games like Batman that's getting ready to come out, and tomorrow. Yeah, Batman comes out tomorrow, depending on when you're watching this video, October 22nd. So that there should be a review push for that. That could help these VR headsets sell, but media outlets do not go and review these games or push them. They'll review the hardware and then they do away with it. So it's very interesting. Graphics, I spoke about that earlier. I feel like that is on a whole different trajectory as into The reception and the focus of graphics, it really should not be the focus. I think we're at a good space. Hell, we were in a good space last generation, to where we should have pivot our focus from graphics, which, like I said, I feel like it's something that should be left alone. Cloud gaming, I will definitely go on the lines of always having options. Cloud gaming in itself, I like the idea of it, especially if let's say I own the game digitally and I'm at my grandmother's house and I don't want to carry my console with me. And let's say I have access to my game via a cloud system. I think GeForce now does that. You have to own the game. But at the same time, if the game is not in their, I guess, system or in their servers, then you can't play it. So have it to where I can play my games anywhere in that nature if I own it. I don't really care if I don't own it, but if I do own it, please give me a way of doing it. So I feel like, yeah, there should be a focus on cloud gaming, but we got to get the internet there first. And then as far as hardware, hardware is forever changing. But when we look at the biggest change, honestly, we look 8 years ago. Switch brought in that hybrid nature. A lot of people want to say that it's something simple, or it wasn't the first one to dock this or first one to do this. And we can always talk about first, but you always have to talk about who innovated it the best and who made it appealing to the masses. And at this point in time, it really came down to Nintendo with the Switch, because honestly, I don't think we would have had a Steam Deck without Switch, or ROG Ally without it. These 1,000 Aya Neo handsets that we have. And, there's a multitude of manufacturers right now that owe their success to Nintendo, because they went out there with a hybrid device and they succeeded like heavily. Like right now, I think it's still number 3 as far as the best selling console of all time. And that's from the last numbers we got. So, we talk about evolution as far as gaming, and there are some gamers, and we talked about it Saturday night on Sandstorm's podcast, that you have to convince them to get off the couch. And if you can't get them off the couch, then make your controller do something different. Make the console do something different. While Xbox gets crapped on all the time, that resume play is amazing. The ability to download a game that I don't own, so when I do buy it, I can just come and play it and don't have to worry about it, is amazing. The fact that even when we talk about something simple as setting up your console, it's a 1, 2, 3 process with, I think, both PlayStation and Xbox. Based off of, using your smartphone with it. So, I mean, all things can evolve, but I think those are the main focuses right now of the gaming space, and that's kind of where I feel they stand at this point in time. So to kind of go into possible issues, when it comes down to where I feel like the possible issues are big time within gaming, is content creation, console wars, funding, creativity, and the lightning in a bottle effect. I mentioned earlier that we need content creators and media platforms, real journalists, to kind of push VR or push gaming in general in the right direction. But man, some of these content creators, goodness gracious, like, I get it. You get more clicks from negativity, but dude, they are by far the worst. I don't get how you come into a space that people already hate it. Whenever, depending on when you were growing up, this still isn't a mass appealing hobby that you can get into. Like, there's still people that look at you sideways if you're above 15 years old playing video games. But when we're talking about content creators that still act like they're 10, 9 years old, or they continue to just crap on one product, when you say that you're a X developer, but then you're constantly talking about Y, that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't evolve the genre. It doesn't evolve anything. All it does is continue to bring more hatred into it. And the one key thing that I liken this to is the WNBA, to where most people were not paying attention to the WNBA. But whenever Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese came in, there was more interest in the game, even though we still had some raw players within the WNBA. But once again, it just depends on who brings the attention. So I'm not going to say, it's not warranted, but there was so much attention that came to the game from negativity. The battle between those two in college, and it just spewed over, and then somehow it got into this black and white thing. And that's why I say, like, while it's also cool, it's cool to have like a bigger fan base, or to have a bigger appeal with a product, especially when we're talking about gaming, sometimes you bring a lot of dead weight with you. And we see it every generation. And once a new console comes out, someone creates a new channel, or creates a channel, or evolves their channel. And depending on who they are, they can come at it from a negative aspect, or they can come at it from a positive aspect. And sometimes it's just the negativity is always in your face, and it's so hard to get on any social media platform and have proper discourse, that it's just so waning and draining on you, and it's ridiculous. And I feel like that's one of the hugest issues with content creators in its entirety. Even with our channel, like I said, we talk about every platform, and we'll give criticism to them. Even Nintendo, like, we give criticism to everybody, but by no means are we ever getting on there dogging the same dead narrative every single night that we get on there. So that's one. Console wars kind of ties into that as well, with these content creators. But the fact that I know, like, I really know people that be in console war conversations and don't own the latest consoles is nuts to me. But it's still like that savage mentality that it just takes over people's brains sometimes, whether you look at it from this gaming perspective or you look at it from war perspective. Like, being a part of something is something that everybody wants. Like, there's nobody on this planet right now that wouldn't love to be a part of a group, whether you say from a religious group or from a gaming group or a sports group, whatever. Like, you see people really enjoying each other's company when you see them with like the same team jersey on, or hey, I just went and bought I don't know, Mario Party. Like, oh man, you play Mario Party, cool. It's a way for you to interact and vibe with people. But then you do have those that take it and they just really just drill into it with the negative aspect of it, of, okay, well, I hate Xbox for this, or they're Xbots, or they're Sony ponies, or whatever. Like, that's their whole purpose. And that's where, we were talking about it again the Saturday night, of there are some people that really are some lonely individuals, and they really have a mental issue, and this is how they interact because they don't know no other way. At the same time, they don't know how to talk to people. At the same time, they don't really know what to do. They're not funny. They're not creative. They're just your everyday person, which is fine, but it's not okay to them. And we see it all the time, even on social media, whether we talk about Instagram, Facebook, whatever. Like, people go out of their way to try to be known, try to be a part of something that they really take themselves out of their own element, if they even have one. And that's why it's like, you have to believe in something or you'll fall for anything. And it's prevalent in the gaming space, and it's something that really needs to change. I don't know how you change, but I take it back. I have something later on that I feel like will change that, but nonetheless, is one of those key things that I feel like is a key issue. Funding, we've seen it time and time again. These companies spending these movie budgets on games that are giving them nowhere near that return. And solely, I'm gonna be honest with you, I feel like it's a mixture of the developers and the the consumers, that buy into that. Like, if I see someone make money off of this $300 million, budgeted game, and they sold Game Busters, the investors are not going to look at what made that game interesting or what made that game sell. They're just going to see the fact that it was spent, that type of money was spent. This is what it looked like. So you as a developer need to do it. Now, if we continue to buy into it, then that's where the problem in itself comes, because the investors are going to stop messing with whatever is not selling. So if we look at, let's say, Madden, for example, and, I hate the dog on Madden, but it is what it is. Madden is the only football game on the market. Only one. They have their agreement with the NFL. I don't know what made the NFL do it, but the fact that that game refuses to improve, solely because people love football so much, they're going to continue buying it. And if I would say just one good year, if people just did not fool with it, I'm not even saying everybody, but just a good chunk of people didn't fool with it, I think EA will kind of turn heel a little bit. But once again, I'm just wishing. Same thing with 2K. The fact that there's legitimate problems with 2K25, and they just released or announced a gravity ball game, like, that has nothing to do with basketball. Like, it literally looks like this just arena, Rocket League, Fortnite game. And within 2K25, it's not a separate game. Lets me know that they just don't care, because They don't have any competition. Why would I do anything different? I can come in here and just experiment all I want to, because your goofy self gonna buy it anyway. So they get away with it. They get away with murder. But I mean, on top of that, not only did they charge you 70, but then the VC or even the MUT stuff or whatever the case may be, like, they're going to find a way to continue to make extra money, but then say, oh, because development costs more, that's why we charge you more. But you're getting what seems like more money from the microtransactions than you do from the sale of the game. That I never understood. Creativity is an issue. We spoke about that earlier. And then the lightning in the bottle effect. We've seen it with Fortnite. We've seen it with Call of Duty. We've seen it with, Breath of the Wild. We've seen it with, what am I missing? I know I'm missing a game, but nonetheless, you know what I'm talking about. That one game that comes out, shines bright. It tears everything up. It's all over social media. It's selling well. All gamers love it. It's being streamed. Like, it's top dog, right? And there's nothing like it. Then you see 55 of them show up right behind it. Whether we talk about the battle royales, we talk about the roguelike games, we talk about the first-person shooters, the hero shooters. Like, they show up because the developer, I would say that the investor wants them to do it, but because I don't know the investor, I know the developer, they do it, and then sometimes it bites them in the behind. When you look at the development time for Concord, had it came out the time they started development, it might have been fine, but right now you're 7 years too late. Like, that bandwagon is gone. And I think I heard an artist say this when it came down to music. It's like, once you hear what the trend is, you're already too late. So you better go ahead and starting on, making that brand new trend, because it's here and now, and it's going to take you a while to make your own version of that trend. So you might as well just start working on the next thing, because right now is right now. And the fact that the chance of you catching that the same way the original developer did is very slim to none, right? So go and do your next thing. When the trend is here. You could try to buy into it. I wouldn't, unless it's a quick turnaround, but more or less start doing your own creative thing from there. All right, so we're coming down to the end of the video. Yeah, we're at the 32-minute marker right now. But I told you it was going to be a long one. But this is at the end, and this is me getting off of my complaint train, or just kind of giving you a breakdown and giving you fixes, right? So I feel like there are 4 key fixes for a lot of this. This isn't everything, but for a lot of this. And some of the fixes I've talked about in between, and especially when it came down to the VR aspect of like what that fix could be. So lowering numbers of high value games, more AA titles, shorten reveal and release timing, and create your own social platform. Now, what I mean by lower number of high value games, to me, I feel like, let's use Sony as an example, right? I feel like when it comes down to a game like God of War Ragnarok, while it's not my favorite God of War, it's not one I really like. I like the first 3. I understand the type of time and budget and effort that goes into that game. I understand that. Same thing with Horizon Zero Dawn. I can't get into it, but I understand. I don't think you should see one of those more than once or twice a console generation. I feel like those type of games should be jewels. Those should be like the diamonds of your generation. Let's say, for example, if Rockstar was a console manufacturer, right? Let's say Rockstar had their own console. They should give you a Grand Theft Auto every generation, and that's what should come from them. I would say maybe, what's their other big game? Hell, do they even have another big game? Well, but at the time they had like a multitude of games. But let's say they had 2 diamonds. Let's say Grand Theft Auto was one of their diamonds, and because I like it, let's say Bully was their other diamond. Those 2 should come out one time each generation. That should be your diamond. When it comes down to Sony, let's say God of War and Spider-Man, right? Let's say those are their 2 diamonds. I should not see a sequel on that current gen coming from them. I shouldn't. And to me, I feel like this, gives that rarity, that mystique to that game, right? Like, because so many times I've seen articles of like, oh, this game just dropped. Wonder what the sequel is going to be like. Like, stop doing that, because you should be focused on that game. And I feel like if they already have in mind that we're not getting the next one until the next generation, then the conversation stays on the current game. We move too fast. We're in this microwave generation and we move way too fast. Like, I should not be talking about what it's like 4 or 5 Horizon games right now, and that game started off on PS4, I believe. So we're talking about a VR version. We talk about the 2 regular versions, talking about remakes, talking about the one that's getting ready to come out on the Lego side of things. Like, it's too much. You're oversaturating the games is what I'm saying. And I feel like there should be like a tier system. So when we talk about the diamonds, like, those should only be like 1 or 2 diamonds that come from you. You have like maybe the golds, like you can have probably like 2 or 3 golds, and I don't know if you would classify those as double the triple A. It don't really matter to me. I hate those terms, but give me a few golds. Silver, you can toss out a whole bunch of silvers. I should never see a bronze. That's where we stop. We don't see a bronze. If you do see a bronze, I would say the bronze should be something that's fun, something real quick, something quick that the family can do that has a little bit of longevity to it, the replayability, if you will. But I think that's kind of how they should look at it. But everybody's trying to shoot for this top dog, this lightning in a bottle, this game that is just loved by all, and really there's too many of them. There should literally not be that many, and even for third-party developers, there should just be one. Like, while I dog Rockstar for not making as many games, really, I mean, them for Grand Theft Auto at this point, and people shut down for that game to show up because they don't show up often. They take their time, make the game, and when they release it, it's a bombshell. That's how those games should be. Now, when it comes down to like even Nintendo side, like Mario's name is one thing, but like I said, we see what a Mario, like the top dog Mario, I think almost once a generation, because we got Odyssey for this one. We shouldn't see an Odyssey 2 this generation, not until the next one. Same thing with Mario Kart. You shouldn't see a multitude of Mario Karts. Those are big dogs. Now, if you want these spin-offs here and there, that's fine. The parties, the baseballs, like those are the spin-off joints. Like those are the side chicks. You know what I'm saying? Like, you need the main dog to only come out one time, only show your face one time, and then you let your backup acts handle the rest of the generation. So I think that's what I'm talking about as far as like lowering the number of high value games. When we talk about more AA titles, it goes into that same conversation. Like, give me more of the smaller ones. Give me more of the backup crew. You know what I'm saying? It develops your creativity. Give it a different spin. Like, put Aloy in like a different type of world or a different type of scenario that's not akin to the main game. We look at Pokemon, it's kind of the same way. Like, the main generation. That bad boy show up once a generation. But they got the spinoffs. They got the mystery dungeon games, even they got Go. They got, in different types of games in between that you're still getting your feel for Pokemon, but it's not the main dog. You know what I mean? So that's what I'm talking about. Shorten the reveal and release timing. I can't say this enough. I understand there's going to be like delays. Like, that's cool. Like, if a game gets delayed, that's fine. That's out of your hands. But when it comes down to you telling me about a game in 2023 and I don't get that joint until 2025, and there could have been some internal stuff, but even when you announce it to me as 2025 and we're in 2023, stop doing that. Like, that's ridiculous. You shouldn't have to tell me that. We're not checking for you to even be doing that right now. Like, that's the crazy part. Like, I'm not checking for you, especially for these games that have new IPs or, hadn't had games in the bucket for a minute. I'm not checking for you, so what are you telling me for? Like, you kind of have to check yourself at that point in time. So people get hyped, and there's a lot of games that come out, so you can get forgotten about real freaking fast. And one thing that points out to me that I really had my eye on and just came out of nowhere one day, and I was like, well, what happened to this game? Is Deca Police. Like, I get there's things that happen, and it was supposed to release at the end of this year, but it pretty much puts a damper in certain things, and you there's so many games that come into place that you tend to forget. So if you don't have it on a wish list, or you don't constantly just focus on 1 or 2 games, yeah, that thing's gonna get left in the dust. And then also creating your own social platform. The main thing I point out is Miiverse. We talk about Miiverse all the time on Winging the Podcast. Like, Jay is an advocate for Miiverse. If they put that man's face on the logo for Miiverse, wouldn't surprise me. Like he's an advocate for Miiverse, and so all of us are. But he is definitely an advocate for Miiverse. But for anybody that were actually a part of Miiverse, of course, it was in its infancy and it needed time to evolve and grow, and it still would need to grow even if it still existed. And that goes with anything. Like nothing that you see today that had time started off the way it is now, when it first released. But I think everyone, Sony needs it, Microsoft needs it, Nintendo needs to bring it back, and then even the Quest side needs to do it too. And there needs to be a prerequisite for you to even utilize that app. If you did not purchase said game, if you don't have an online account with us in some shape, form, or matter, like you cannot post on this. You can't come on here without having some type of validity that you own this product. There's too many times that we see people talk about, oh, this game's horrible, or don't purchase this, or don't do this, or don't go see that, or don't blah, blah, blah. And they didn't do it themselves. They just looking at either trailers or they're listening to another content creator and taking their feedback and using it as their own feedback. Like I said, we have a lot of sheep on social media, and I need a lot of y'all to understand that. Like there's a lot of sheep on social media and they just run with the crowd. Like that's what they do. So when we talk about, getting gaming back in a good positive space, you have to gatekeep. You have to start filtering. So if I said to you like, all right, cool, I genuinely want to know if, I don't know, Sparking Zero is a great game. Now, Sparking Zero isn't an exclusive game, but it's on, a multitude of platforms. If I want to say, okay, well, how does it run on my Xbox, right? Let me go to Xbox social media platform and say, all right, cool. Like, let me go to the Sparking Zero page. All right, cool. Yeah, everybody. All right, we doing this. Okay, cool. People killing people with Yajirobe. All right, but like Hercule's the top dog. Like that's the stuff. Like you go and you interact with people like you. And I know there's things like Reddit, stuff like that really is geared towards that in a way. But once again, is not the main focus of Reddit. And then also too, is not something that is solely based around it. Sometimes you may not find anything about a particular game. There are games that come out that I don't find out about until later on, and they have a cult following. You know what I'm saying? I would love to be able to say, all right, cool, I'm going to Xbox app, talking to people that have it on Xbox and that play this particular game, and they can give me real feedback. And where that's also important as well too is when you look at things like both Steam and Meta Horizons OS, right? If I go to Steam and I look at the reviews, there is like the main reviews, and then you have the user reviews. Now, people can go in there and just dog it out. Like those that will go in and say like, okay, well, no, it's a 0 because I don't believe into this company's practices, or, they didn't release on my console, so I'm gonna give it a 0. That in itself should cut that out entirely, because it's a main platform for people that actually own the console and actually own the game. Also, it needs to be monitored as well. That's one of the key issues that the Quest has. I will say almost every game you look at on Quest is like 4 stars and above. Those games are not worth no damn 4 stars and above. Not every one of them. No, there are some games that are top dogs. Like Underdog is one that I will say needs to be 5 stars on there. But there are some games that really are not even games, and you'll still see people with reviews up there for 4 stars or 5 stars for the game just because they sampled it one time and was like, oh, this game was amazing, and they only played it for like 2 hours. Like you have to put some type of ruling in place, similar to how like what was it, Nintendo Switch Online, or not online, but the Nintendo Shop, to where like a lot of developers were being at the top of the charts because they were able to price their games at 99 cents. And so Nintendo fixed that. Like they kind of cut that off. Same thing here. Like you need to have time within this game. It ain't got to be a master amount of time. I would say probably like 2 hours, 2 or 3 hours legitimately into the game. And like, all right, cool, this was my review, and you need to have a certain amount of characters that you put in this too. And if you got something like a picture and you figure out how to do that with, emojis and stuff, all right, your comment gets yanked or people can report you. Like it needs to be a space that's closed off, because in reality, the way we do things now, we try to leave it open to the masses where everybody's invited. I hate to tell you, like that shouldn't be for everything. That's why things get oversaturated. I would even say that with music, like the fact that I love the fact that I can release music when I want to, but let's be honest, like for the music I release, while I love it, there wouldn't be a label to pick me up and y'all would never hear it. So because it's not top-notch music that, your top-notch artist right now, like a Cole or a Kendrick or whatever, would release. So I understand that. Like I'm very humbling of myself. I'm a very tight critic of myself. So the same thing should be done within the gaming space. If your comment is trash, if there's no validity to it, get it up out of there. But if you leave it open to an X or leaving it to an Instagram or Facebook or whatever, that's hard to curate. So make it specific for your platform, and then bam, there you go. Make channels for each one, so that way I don't have to dig for whatever. All I gotta do is like, okay, let me search up Mario. Mario and Luigi Brothership. Bam, what's the reviews look like? Like, how y'all doing? Like, let me talk to you. Let me have this conversation with you about this game. And then if I like what we talking about, I go cop it. Even when it comes down to finding people to play with Mario Party now that it's online, that'll be an easy way to do it. So I think those are like some quick fixes, you know, and I said it was going to be long. I didn't want to get too long, but that's just like a brief overview, because I can really get in this for hours. I can turn this into a whole live stream situation if I wanted to. But all in all, I try to make this as short as possible. But with my closing statement, in all honesty, I love gaming. I love it as a hobby. I've been playing for a long time. I'm 36 years old. I got my kids into it. You know, it's something that I truly enjoy. My family enjoys. But it can really be a lot better. And it's hard to have yourself and your kids in this space and keep your peace. That's why I take my hats off to a lot of content creators that do this full time, because you get a lot of positivity, but at the same time you get much more negativity. And sometimes that one or two, you're doing a good job, don't trump the 1,000 I hate you, you should die. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's the craziest thing to me about people, and it's solely because, you know, you can't be touched behind that keyboard. But all in all, you know, I take my hat off to the developers, take my hats off to the manufacturers for even giving us this stuff, because otherwise, if they didn't make it, we wouldn't be talking about it. But all in all, with anything that we do, criticism is necessary. You know, outside looking in is necessary for you to evolve. So I'm looking forward to where we go from here. I'm looking forward to any conversation that comes from this. If you watch this whole thing, kudos to you. Kudos to you. And I'll try to keep my eyes on the comment section. But all in all, I want to continue having this conversation about how we can evolve this industry that we all love. But thank you for your time. It's been your boy Action Jack. I'm out. Peace.